Okay. Okay. Happy snow day, everybody. Here we are having our virtual coffee contracts and conversations. I'm here with Tony Jones with Nexa Mortgage. And, we're sitting here um, talking about the weather. And I was hoping for snow. I don't know about you, Tony, but
Oh, I
right
was
now we always want snow. But we're getting ice pellets. I don't know what you're getting over on your side of town.
same thing.
Yeah. The
It's
kids went
freezing.
out and played in the ice.
Yeah,
It's
freezing
kind of a
rain.
bummer for them. Yeah, but, we take what we can get here, I guess, wintry weather. So I've got my coffee, and, yeah, we're here to talk about what's happening in the real estate market right now, and today we're going to really just kind of focus on the Clackamas County area, just a laser focus there. And if you have questions about any specific areas, if I have the information that's easily available for me to grab, I'll try to answer it for you. But otherwise, we'll just kind of use Clackamas County as our space for today. And Tony's going to have some great information on the lending side as well to share with you.
Hey, Jen, maybe we should let them know, that our original intention for the coffee shop
Oh
uh,
yes,
gathering.
you're correct. We're doing this virtually today because um, we were supposed to actually have this event be a live in-person coffee contracts and conversations at Gwen's Willamette Coffee House in Canby, but in the weather, of course, out of an abundance of caution, we're doing this event virtually today, and we're going to be rescheduling that in-person event. So we're working on that. So more to come. Stay tuned. Would love to buy you a coffee and some treats and talk about real estate. Just answer your questions, super casual format, and go from there. So stay tuned on that. Thanks for that reminder. Yeah. So, I guess without further ado, we can just kind of get things going. Um, I have here, and I will get this put up here. This is a few slides here. We don't want to spend a ton of time on these because if you all have questions out there, would love to answer those. So be sure to send a comment wherever you're watching. Give us a comment, and we will get that question answered for you to the best of our ability. So I've titled this "How's the Market?" because that is the question I get all the time, no matter where I go. How's the market? And it's a very ambiguous question with a lot of possible answers, a lot of different directions we could go. So we're going to talk about how's the market, but we're going to talk about Clackamas County. So, oh, and I didn't introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Schurter with Real Broker, by the way. So let's keep going here. So we're going to focus on three main points through this to say, well, so how is it here? How is the real estate market? We're going to break down some Clackamas County numbers and get to kind of what's going on out there right now and break down the top three opportunities for buyers and sellers, as well as some things that buyers and sellers should be on the lookout for as we go through 2024 and the market that is our real estate market. So the first thing I want to talk about is the median days on market. When you look at this information, if you're a buyer or a seller, this is an indication of about how long it's taking for houses to sell. And now remember that the median means the middle, to throw it back to high school math class or middle school math class, where we take all of the values listed from lowest to highest. That median is that middle point. Not always a perfect number necessarily, but it does give us an idea. So if we look at this from Clackamas County, this is from realtor.com that's been compiled into this nice little graph so we can see the trends over time. You'll see that this data goes back to October. We had a median days on market of about 59 days. So it's taking about 59 days going into the fourth quarter for most homes to sell. So then we get to the median listing price, and this answers the question for buyers and sellers of what are homes selling for in this particular area. And again, this is the median, so this is the middle price point. Another point I'd like to add about the median is, it can be skewed based on how many very expensive properties are for sale or how many lower priced properties are for sale. So, but I think it's pretty safe to say that going through 2023, which is where this data is, end of 22 through 23, that we were anywhere from about 700 to 750-ish, 760 range, and through there. So it'll be interesting to see where we are pacing coming into 2024. But you could safely say, based on this data, that homes in Clackamas County in the median price point range are selling from anywhere between 700 and around 750, 760,000.
So, Jen, house prices did take a little bit of a dip, and what are they doing right now? Over the last maybe 4 to 6 months, what have you seen?
Yes. So what we'll do is we'll look at some of this information in a few more slides. So as far as what's happened the last 4 to 6 months, if you look at the Portland, Oregon metro area in general, if we look at the latest market action report that came out from December, so the data is always pacing a month behind. The Portland, Oregon metro area, our average price point was up, I want to say 2%. So pretty modest. But as you'll see in some of the data I'll show you, it really just depends on what particular area that you're in, because real estate's hyper local. So we could talk about Portland Metro, we could talk about the national statistics, but really where it's going to be most meaningful for you as a buyer or as a seller is to look at the individual area that you are going to be buying a home in or selling your home in. So we will get to that, to be continued. But that's a great question. So active listings right here, again, sourcesrealtor.com. Back in October, we had 1,024 listings active in the month of October. So it's kind of been in that range. We saw a low in about between December and April before it started to go up again. That low being 614 units. So as you can see, that part, if inventory goes down and we see interest rates come down also, then we could see some competitive action in the real estate market here. So,
and we've already been seeing some of that. Interest rates have been coming down slowly, but they have taken a turnaround, and we are seeing more activity. And we'll talk more about what that activity, how that affects your position as a buyer in the market.
Absolutely. Okay, so our next one is we're going to talk about something called months of inventory. And this is one way that we measure what's happening in the real estate market. So when we say there's 2 months of inventory, what does that mean exactly? And the best way we can break it down is to say that it's about how long it would take for all the homes that are on the market right now to sell, should nothing else actually come onto the market. So if we have 2 months of inventory, it would take 2 months for all those houses to sell. If we had 10 months of inventory, it would take about 10 months. So based on that, generally it's understood in the real estate space that if we had about 6 months of inventory, it's in stasis or it's balanced. Anything less than 6 months, you're going to be getting into a seller's market. Anything more than 6 months, you're in a buyer's market. So the next slide, did you have something you wanted to add, Tony?
No, that's good information to know. What the tipping point is, and maybe we can go into more detail later on as far as what's the difference between a buyer's market and a seller's market, the advantages and disadvantages.
Sure, you bet. So here we have a trend report, and this is showing for Clackamas County. This is the month of December. So the last slides we saw were compiled data through October. This is the most recent from December for Clackamas County specifically. This green box here on the right side of this graph is where I would like to point you. That is showing that in Clackamas County right now, it's about 2.8 months of inventory. So if we use that previous slide as a guide and saying, okay, so 6 months or less in inventory means we're in a seller's market. And right now in Clackamas County, we have about 2.8 months. That means that we are in a seller's market based on that rule right there. So that is the inventory level in Clackamas County. So I would still consider that to be pretty low. There's some talk out there about how maybe 3 months is the new 6, but I think that really all depends on a lot of things. Maybe in the market we're in today, 3 months is the new 6 months for getting more into a buyer's market. But I still think there's a very limited amount of inventory out there and still a lot of pent up buyer demand that just hasn't come back to the market since interest rates have been higher. Would you
Uh,
agree with that?
Absolutely. And, something that I'll get a little bit more into is, interest rates have turned around. They were going up, as I'm sure a lot of you know, and they are starting to come down. As the interest rates come down, that is also something that influences whether or not we're in a buyer's or seller's market. As the interest rates come down, it's going to get stronger and stronger into a seller's market.
Mhm.
So to get so it's to your advantage as a buyer to try to beat the seller's market, because you're going to get a better deal, you're going to get better opportunities, as it right now than as it gets more into a stronger seller's market, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. You bet. Okay, so let's go on to the next one here. So, another big question, if it's not how's the market, what's going on in the market, is well, what about my home? What do you think is going on with my property? So, one of the things, again, we briefly mentioned this a little bit ago, but we could talk about national or regional trends. That's one piece of the puzzle, but really your local area, whether that's your zip code, your neighborhood, or your individual town or city that you live in, is what's really going to matter in any real estate market. It was easy to kind of paint a broad brushstroke over the last couple years when things were really hot, houses were selling really, really quickly. So, what I wanted to do here was say, well, what do 3 different areas in Clackamas County, what's actually been going on there? Just to kind of give you a good idea of how different it can be between different cities. So, it's kind of a tale of 3 cities that we're going to look at here. And also a point of note too is, a lot of folks out there look at that digital value. They go to Zillow, they go to Redfin or Realtor.com, and they see their Zestimate or any of those values there. And it is what it is. They're tools. They've done a good job of building those platforms, and people know to go there for information. But I would say use that with caution. It's an idea, but it's in no way accurate. It's a computer algorithm, and so I would encourage you, if you have questions about what your home could actually be, where it could fall in the market. We can certainly have a conversation about that offline. There's a lot of different factors that go into making that determination. So let's take a look at these 3 cities. The first one we're going to look at here is Canby. Since it's our hometown, Tony, we are going to look at Canby. So in the red circle, what we have there is the median sale price in Canby is around $610,000. So if we use that as our litmus test for what's going on with pricing in the market, uh, under there, and I know it's probably small for some of you to see, but according to this, it's up 0.5%. I would say that's kind of a wash. It's up a little bit, but really, let's call it flat. Let's call it even here in Canby. Another interesting point of note for those folks out there who are either looking to buy or sell, this is an important piece of information for you to consider, and that is this green circle, which is the list to sale price ratio. So if a house lists for $500,000 and it sells for $500,000, that means they got 100% of the asking price. So in Canby right now, the sale to list price is coming in at 99.3. So their sellers in our market are getting offers basically coming in just slightly under 100%. I would say that's still pretty good. I still think that's a very good indication of a strong seller's market in Canby when we look at that. Another thing to point out that's very local to Canby, there's lots of new construction, and a lot of these new construction developments don't accept less than asking price. So that is what's going on there. And in the blue circle, we can see that about 25% of homes that sold in Canby went for over asking price. So that's what's going on in Canby. So that's one thing. Let's take a look at what's happening in Happy Valley. So, totally different story here. The median price there is $617,000, and that one is down about 11% or so over year. So totally different story. Went from flat in Canby, thereabout, to being down 11% ish. In the green circle, you'll see they're getting about 97.5% sale to list price. So their offers are coming in slightly under ask there in Happy Valley. And 18.8% of homes sold for over ask in Happy Valley. So we had a level with Canby, we had a down in median sale price in Happy Valley. Let's talk about West Lynn. Here's another totally different story. The red circle, $857,500, the median sale price in December in West Lynn. That is up about 25% or so over the previous year. So again, a totally different story than we saw in two other cities. In green, you'll see that the sale to list price, 98.3%. And about 20.8, 21% of homes went for over asking price. So I wanted to show this to demonstrate that, gosh, three different cities, three different real estate markets, three different, totally different worlds of things that are happening in these local areas. And that's why it's really important to really pay attention to what's going on in your backyard rather than the overall regional or even national trends that we're seeing. What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, I was looking at, I was doing some research on some charts here while you were talking, so I didn't catch what you said.
It's
Sorry.
okay.
My
How dare
fault.
you?
I'm paying attention to you.
Bad, Tony. It's fine. It's all good. Tony's already heard this. We did a run through of this last night. So anyway, if you have questions about your specific area where you live, I can pull this kind of information and we can have this conversation and what that means for you. Whether you're looking to buy or sell, just out of curiosity, this is a fair question to ask to know what's going on in your neighborhood. So now that we know all of that, what's going on in the market? It is currently a seller's market. I wouldn't say it's that way just in Clackamas County, but for the metro region as well. Right now, we have more buyers looking than homes available. So anytime that happens, we have low inventory. It's a seller's market. Inventory, I would say, is still low. And again, this is a big if. And Tony, I'm sure you'll agree with this too, but it's safe to say that yes, we hear that interest rates could come down. We can certainly look forward to it, plan ahead should it be happening, but we don't necessarily count on it as a certainty. So we just kind of have to watch and see what's going to happen. So if rates do come down, what does this actually mean for buyers or sellers? So let's talk. Here's our top 3 opportunities for sellers. So if you're going to sell a property, here are the 3 things I think that you need to know given all this information. So the first one is, assuming those rates come down or stay low, we could see more serious buyers start to come back into the market. Every time those rates come down, it opens a door of affordability for a group of people who were priced out at a slightly higher rate. So every time it goes down, you might have more people start to enter into the real estate market. What do you think, Tony?
No, that's absolutely true. And like we were saying earlier, as interest rates come down and more people enter the market, like you're saying, it becomes a buyer frenzy. It can, like it has in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So it's if depending on your goals and your needs, as far as how if you're moving, whatever reason that you're moving, if it's you can move if you want to, but you're kind of don't need to, but you'd like a different house, you'd like a nicer house, or if you're moving because of a job change or whatever, even though rates are coming down and they've kind of settled over the last week, over the new year. That's kind of what happens at the beginning of the new year. Rates usually just kind of settle and are kind of flat. Investors are watching the markets and just kind of settle in for a while until they see the direction that investors are going again, and then they'll start making more significant moves one way or the other. Right now, getting your house listed would be in your benefit, I would say, as these people are more people are coming into the market.
Right. Absolutely. And we're getting ready to go into spring. I know it's literally ice pellets are hitting my window right now and it's probably 20 degrees outside. But spring market is technically around the corner. They say that the old saying is the Super Bowl means the start of the spring market, which is about a few weeks away from now, which is crazy to think about. But interesting to think that things tend to start picking up in general, in historically speaking, in the springtime. So number two on our top three opportunities for sellers is that a limited inventory on the market means the potential for more attention for your property, assuming that it's marketed and priced well. And I say marketed and priced well for a very important reason. And that is because a home that is not priced well, if it's overpricing where the market actually is, if you think, gosh, well, sure, 425 sounds great, but why wouldn't you try for 450 when the market and all the information is 425? That could be to a major disadvantage for you. We could spend $1 million trying to market your home at that price and nobody will buy it if they don't see the value at that price. So pricing is, I would say, an incredibly important part of any marketing strategy that you are going to take on as a seller. And it is really important to look at those numbers and be very strategic with that. I would even argue it's even smarter to come in slightly under where the market is. I think that that's a safe bet. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to leave money on the table. Again, it's all part of a strategy. You can talk through pros and cons when you get ready to sell and you're kind of deciding what your pricing strategy will be. So marketing and pricing are very important in this equation.
And I
Yeah.
could add a little bit to that on the finance side of things. You don't want to price the house more than it will appraise for. If the buyer doesn't have cash, we have to have an appraisal for financing. If it doesn't appraise for that 450 amount or that higher amount, then that's going to cause complications. As a seller, either the buyer has to come up with the difference if you don't come down to the appraised value, or basically you just have to come down to the appraised value for it to be able to be financed.
Absolutely. And that's just, I would say, an efficiency for your transaction as well. And I know that it's coming at this from somebody who's sold a home before. You want to maximize and get the most you possibly can. Nobody wants to think about missing out or leaving money on the table.
Sure.
But sometimes you overprice, and like Tony's saying, you get into those situations where you're overpriced, the appraiser comes in, and then you might lose the deal because the buyer just cannot. And if especially some folks might just want to hold fast to that price. So I think it's important to consider all avenues when you are being strategic with your pricing. So the number 3 one is golden handcuffs for many sellers. So folks out there who might like to sell their home have something we call golden handcuffs. And what does that mean exactly? That is a lot of folks have a really low interest rate. They got in and either purchased or refinanced their property back when interest rates were super low, and they might have a 2 in front of their interest rate, or a 3, even a 4 in today's market is a very low and a very attractive interest rate. So for them to sell, it just really doesn't make sense because, wow, our payment is so low. If we really make the move we want to make to get into a better home, it's going to cost us more money. So these golden handcuffs have them kind of married to their house at the low interest rate that they have. So if that continues, we may continue to see that inventory shortage for a while until those rates really start to come down. That might get some of those sellers off the fence and out of a living arrangement that may not be it might be tolerable, but may not be their favorite. What do you? What do you think about that, Tony? I mean, on the lending side, you see this too.
Yeah. As far as being married to the house, I'm going to use that term in a different sense when we get to my slides and my information. It's kind of a saying that we have is date the rate, marry the house. That's if you're purchasing, and hasn't and that's in relation to where rates are now, and they're still a little bit higher than um, people think they should be. Although interest rates when I bought my first house was 13.5%, my first house, which is crazy, but I still bought a house at that range. Obviously, house prices were a lot less then, but the mortgage rates are getting better, and we'll talk about that here in a few more minutes.
Yeah. Um, Great. So then we'll move on. Our next slide, buyers, we didn't forget about you. Here are the top 3 opportunities, the way I see it, looking into 2024 for anybody who's looking to buy a home here in the coming months. So number 1, generally speaking, and this has been my experience, and I think this is carrying through into 2024, is that sellers are generally open-minded to negotiate with you for things like your closing costs. So if you want to cover some of your closing costs, or even take advantage of an interest rate buy down, which Tony's going to talk about a little bit more and what that means for you. Price, terms, closing costs, all those types of things, sellers are open minded, I would say, generally speaking, to negotiate. Not every time. And within reason, based on that individual transaction or individual that you're talking to. So definitely be strategize with an agent. So when I sit down with clients for a buyer strategy session, we're talking about what it's really like to buy a house today and what actually is happening, what's actually working, and what we can do to secure that opportunity for you as a buyer. These strategies are important for you to know. So before we go into it, we already have an idea of different tools and tactics that we can use for you as a buyer to make something work. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, again, this is assuming you can afford it and you can make a move. I know not everybody's in the space. Interest rates are really playing a big part of the affordability equation for folks right now. But I would say if this is you and you're ready and willing and able, it is a good time to buy while many others are on the fence. So Tony mentioned something which I've heard arguments against the date the rate marry the house, that it's a cringy statement, but I would say as kind of a deviation from that in the same lane is you really only get one shot at the sale price you're buying. And I think that while there aren't as many people out there on the market buying a property right now, this is your chance to secure that sale price that you want. So I think that that less competition is an opportunity for you as well. And then, yeah, go ahead. I'm
Yeah,
sure you have something to say about
I
my
appreciate
cringy.
that. Okay, I appreciate you going into that a little bit. So the intention of that term, date the rate, marry the house, is if you find a house that you love and you want to and or you need to have more house, interest rates right now they are coming down, so you can always refinance, or there's other options that I'll cover, but refinancing is one that, as long as you can afford the current rate and not put yourself in a bad position, we're not saying that. If you can afford it right now, and it might make things a little bit tight for going on vacations or other kinds of things that you want to be able to do with your income, your finances. Think of it as a short-term situation, and that you are able to. There's on most loans, and you want to make sure you talk to your lender, that there are no prepayment penalties. The loans I do, 99% of them do not have a prepayment penalty. That means that you could. So let's say you locked into an interest rate that you could afford today and buy the dream house at 6%. Well, if in 6 months, 2 months even, or a year, interest rates come down by a full percent, now they're down at 5%, that's going to reduce if you have a $400,000 mortgage payment, if it went from 6% to 5%, that's going to reduce your mortgage payment by $260 a month, roughly.
That's huge.
That's a pretty significant savings. So that's why lenders like to say date the rate, marry the house, is because you can get into your dream house now, And as long as you can afford the payment, just kind of this, we'll watch the rates for you, and we will work with you down the road to get refinanced into a better interest rate.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's it's an interesting statement, and I think and I appreciate that's perfect explanation behind the verbiage, because I think some people might hear that and say, "Well, what does that mean? I can't
Correct.
even afford to buy a house now." Like it's like obviously
It,
nobody's condoning anybody getting upside down, when they enter into buying a property. So yeah, perfect. Yeah, love that explanation. I think that really clarifies it for folks.
cool.
So yeah. And then the third one is rate buy downs. Tony's going to talk about this too, but it is an option, is a way that you can make your monthly payment more affordable. There's different options there. And, going back to number one, generally speaking, again, sellers may be open-minded to offering you a credit to pay for that. It's where you can pay down that interest rate. And there's different options for that. So that has been successful for me with my clients in the last year. And I think that's going to be something moving forward that a lot of buyers are going to look for, to keep things affordable, especially for folks looking at it as I have a monthly payment amount I really need to make, or this is our number. I think this is going to be a good way to help you achieve that. Okay. And then the top three things that anybody should watch for, whether you're a buyer or a seller, or just generally what's happening in the market. Number one, if rates continue to come down, competition could increase for buyers. For sellers, that could mean more traction, more activity with your property. And so number two, looking at things from a very big picture, nationally, home prices may grow in the single digit range, um, unless rates come down significantly. So I think if rates make a huge move and we get to 5% by the end of the year, I think things all could break loose in a lot of ways, because that's a pretty significant change. So it really hinges a lot of it on those interest rates. And then the third and final is that new construction is going to, I think, be a key player providing inventory relief, because I just don't think a lot of home shoppers are finding existing homes that they want to buy. So that available inventory out there, they feel is overpriced. They feel is not a good property to buy. So, or they can't afford it. So I think that that's where new construction is going to play a key role in 2024 and beyond, until some of these things break loose a little bit more. That's new construction is going to be there. And I will add, as a real estate agent, to anybody here in Oregon, that if you want to look at new construction, you can absolutely bring your own agent to the builder. You don't necessarily have to be pigeonholed into working with that builder's agent. If you would like to have your own representation and you want somebody on your side specifically, so you're not having what's called dual agency, where that builder's rep is actually working for both parties at that point. So if you like the idea of having somebody who is a third party representing your interests, then know that you can do that. Okay. And that's my piece. So thank you for listening to me talk about the market today. So here's my contact information. I'm with Real Broker here in the Portland, Oregon metro region. And that code there, if you scan it, it's going to take you to my link tree where you can connect with me, my website, my social media channels, whatever, however you want to connect. Pretty much name your poison. You can reach me at any of those places. And I'll put that back up here at the end for a few minutes in case anybody wants to see that as well. So what do you think, Tony? Well, anything I missed?
I think it's about time I told them what's going on with interest
Yes,
rates.
yes,
I think
because in a real,
that was good
yeah,
information.
yeah, in the real estate world, we're a team. The lender and the real estate agent are the dream team that carries the transaction forward. So it's really, it's like peanut butter and jelly. We're part of the
You
sandwich,
know,
right?
and there's a lot to be said. So, what's interesting, I've been in the business for 24 years plus, and um, there's a lot of times that um, I get a realtor that refers me a client that's already got their financing through Rocket Mortgage or one of these other online mortgage places because that's how they connected, and they just think, okay, I'll just get my financing wherever, and then. But it's a really huge advantage to work with a realtor that is connected with a lender that they trust. If you already don't have a relationship, if you have a relationship with a lender, obviously, that's gold. You really need,
Mhm.
just like with a realtor, working with a realtor you trust, you also want to work with a lender you trust. And if you have a realtor that refers somebody that they trust, it's a good idea to at least give that lender, a call to find out what they've got for them, because that relationship is really important throughout the whole transaction, because it comes down to communication. A lot of times when you work with the lenders that are online lenders, they don't have a relationship with the realtor, so they don't really communicate as well, and that can make the buying experience very rough. So
Mhm.
that's just
Yes.
2 cents on that.
Right or wrong also on and as a consumer, you have the right to select whoever you want to work with regardless. You always go the direction you find is going to be the best for you in your individual situation. Um, right or wrong, and this has been an experience that we've dealt with before when dealing with a client, is who was pre-approved through one of these big national lenders, and the seller wasn't crazy about that lender because they didn't feel like it was as reliable, because somebody was based in another market many cities, states away, that they didn't feel as confident. But I've also done deals with those lenders before, and it's been fine. There's so much to consider, but at the end of the day, I always recommend local, because at least you know as a consumer, and I know that when I'm working, if I need to write an offer and I need questions or we need a pre-approval letter because it's a tight turnaround, I can call Tony at 8 p.m. on a Saturday. Sorry, Tony. And
Thanks a
say,
lot.
text him, say, hey, we're in a tight, can you shoot over a pre-approval letter so we can get this in because it's competitive and we want to be first in line. And
Right.
I feel more confident on that side, knowing I can call you and text you and have just almost just instant access most of the time, or
Yeah.
within
Well,
reason to get
we're
something done.
we're in the same time zone, so you're not working with somebody
Mhm.
that they're 3 hours ahead of you or 2 hours ahead of you, and you can't get a hold of them because they're already doing something else and they're not accessible anymore. And not only that, you can come across issues, that knowing the local market, having relationships with the local appraiser that appraises the property, say the title company, having the relationship with those locally, and not having that relationship, again, comes to the communication and how smooth the process will go. If there happens to be little
Mhm.
things that come up that are challenges and you got to work through them, again, the time difference and having somebody that doesn't know the market it can go smooth. Not saying it can't, it
Mhm.
can, but it's just a little bit better to your advantage if
Mm.
it's low.
Yeah, I agree completely. And somebody like Tony, with his amount of experience, is going to be a wealth of knowledge for anybody out there who's looking to make a purchase or is curious about the steps. I'm sure in your vast experience, there's not been a lending situation that you haven't seen or dealt with. So, at all stripes of types of financial situations, and even if you're nervous about bringing something to the table because there's something in your financial history that you might kind of you know, be a little nervous to talk about. These folks, lenders like Tony, are here to help. And again, there's nothing he hasn't seen in his
Pretty much.
experience. So don't be ashamed. There's no shame in any of it. And if you're curious and you want to know what steps to take, um, the best place to start is to really just have that conversation, reach out and get that process going without any shame. Tony's gonna take great care of you.
Oh, Thanks, Jen. I appreciate those
Yeah.
words. And along with that, yeah, I mean, it is really, really important. Again, it all comes down to communication with the lender that you decide to work with. Um, Letting them know everything you possibly can about your financing up front is going to help them get you qualified the right way right off the bat. It's just like a solid foundation. You build a house on a solid foundation, right? You don't build it on sand. And from there going up, it's going to depend on the quality of the house that you build. Same thing with financing. If you don't share everything and there's something that comes up after you've already spent money and you've put in, you know, 20 days into this process and you're getting excited, you're getting packed and everything, the movers are coming and all this. And then all of a sudden the lender finds out about something that you didn't share. You didn't think it was important. And you thought, oh, that's not a big deal. Well, that came up. And then all of a sudden the brakes come on and you're not sure whether or not you're going to be able to complete the transaction or not. Hopefully they will get through it, but by sharing everything up front that you can is very important for the success of the transaction.
Hey,
Uh,
Tony, we have a question from Facebook from my friend Laura Petek. Hi, Laura.
Laura?
Laura's an agent in Cleveland, Ohio. So if anybody watching is interested in the Cleveland area, which could be an excellent place for investment properties, for anybody out there who's looking to build a portfolio with some doors, this gal's super knowledgeable. So here's her question. Can we talk about multiplex FHA rules and opportunities? I'm sure you have some insights on this that you would be able to offer. I know there's some new rules and some new things that have happened as of November of 2023 that play into this.
Jen, do you have anything specific on what you're saying as far as the new things in
Wasn't
23?
that the change to the down payment minimums to buy like up to 2 to 4 units owner
Oh,
occupied?
yeah, that did come out. You're right. I completely forgot about that. Um, but the minimum downs, that wasn't specific to FHA. Let me think about that for just a second. But talking
We can
about
always come back to it too if we need to. If you want to go through some of your other stuff, we can always come back to it. But I think, yeah,
multiplex opportunities with FHA and the rules. Well, as far as FHA goes, you can purchase, just very a high level. I'll just hit that for a second. As far as you can buy up to a four unit property with 3.5% down payment, which is pretty minimal to buy an investment property. You can purchase it as an owner occupied. So you would occupy one of the units, and you can use 75% of the income. So let's say from the renters. So let's say you have 3 other renters and you've never been a landlord before. You don't have experience. Normally you have to have landlord experience to be able to count the income from renters, but FHA will allow you to count 75% of the gross rents. So if you get $1,000 from each of those rents, you can include $750 from each of those to help qualify for the mortgage payment, because obviously it's going to be a higher priced house than a standard property. That you may not qualify without being able to include the income from those rents. So you're able to get into a $700,000 property when, if it was just your income, you'd only be able to afford a $300,000 property, which can help you get started in owning your own investment properties, which is, I highly recommend if you have the aptitude to be a landlord. It's a great way to build wealth, and it's the earlier you can get into it, again, if that's what you want to do, being a landlord. It takes a special special characteristics to be a
Mhm.
landlord.
Yeah, it does. And she says, thank you. That's what I needed to know. Using the rents as income is a great advantage.
Yeah. And so you don't, in fact, it could be a brand new duplex, triplex, fourplex without any renters. It doesn't have to have any leases in place. What happens is we order an appraisal with a rent schedule from the appraiser, and the appraiser establishes what the value of the rents will be, and then that's what we use for the number that we go off of to include in your income.
Mm, right.
So it doesn't have to
Yeah.
already have, doesn't have to be existing, doesn't have to have leases in place. It can be what the expected future rents will be.
Mhm.
Or
Cool.
even if, let's just say, we'll go another direction. If there's already rents in place and the landlord's not charging the market rents, we still can, and they're only charging say 400 a month for the rent, but the appraiser comes back and says you could get $700 for this rent. We can use the appraiser's rent rather than what the
Mm,
current rent is.
that's
So,
awesome. That's
so you
really good.
just want to make sure you work with a lender that knows all the little tricks and hoops to jump through.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your question, Laura.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Love that. Thanks for chiming in with that there. And I will put this reminder out there. Anytime anybody's out there watching that has questions or wants to ask something, please feel welcome to just make a comment here on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you are, wherever you're watching. And we're happy to address those. Laura says, that's great. She didn't know future rents were eligible. So thank you so
Absolutely.
much. So very cool. Thanks for your comment.
And
So,
actually,
yeah.
let me just add one caveat. Conventional allows the same thing now. It was back end of 21, I believe, or somewhere in, I think, 21. Conventional required that you had landlord experience. You had to be able to show that you had at least a
Mm,
year as a landlord on your tax returns. Conventional will now allow future rents just like FHA does, but they will only allow it to go towards the mortgage payment on the property.
mhm.
Um, they won't allow it to go to be included in the whole debt to income ratio. FHA allows it on the whole debt to income ratio, conventional only on the mortgage payment.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
Interesting.
We can go
Yeah.
more into depth in
I
depth on that on another
we could
podcast.
probably spend an entire hour talking about that topic alone and how that is a tool for people who are aspiring to be a property investor, even like FHA with that program, somebody who's newer to the home ownership arena or who might want to take advantage of that as an owner occupied. I mean, what a great way or great tool to be able to get into that opportunity, um, and use that to build that future. So I think that's really cool. But yeah,
Well,
maybe we'll have to come back and do that in the future.
let me give you just one more example, and this is a personal example. I bought a primary residence myself, a fourplex. My interest rate was 5.25%. And with my three tenants, I lived in one of the units. With my three tenants, my mortgage was paid, my utilities were paid, and I made a profit of about $150 a month after everything's paid. They paid my mortgage. I lived in
Wow,
my unit for free.
that's incredible.
Really, you may not be able to right now where rates are at. Might not be as good of that situation. Depends on how much you can get for rents and all that kind of stuff. You got to do the math with your lender or your realtor if they want to help, or your realtor's lender that they use. Um, but you do the math and you can figure it out and say, okay, yeah, I can handle that. So
Mhm.
it could be to your advantage.
Yeah, very cool. I think
So
that's awesome. So anyway, we can move on if you want, if you're ready to talk about your information you have here that you've outlined for us all. So
sure,
take
and,
it
and
away there. Yeah.
all right, you bet. And I'm just going to do from a high level, um, uh, information wise, because all of these things that I'm going to talk about can be so dissected. it will take forever. So I'm just going to hit it from a high level. And if anybody wants to talk about anything in more detail, you can contact me. I don't know if you can read my information on there, but we'll make sure you get both of our information. So if you want to talk about any of this in more detail, you can certainly contact us anytime. I'm not a bank. I work the same hours as realtors do. You can contact me just about 24/7. Evenings, weekends, like I said, I don't have banker hours. So I'll just get into the information and hit this real quick. And then if anybody has questions, we can hit it in more detail.
It's
So,
funny when we say that stuff, Tony, because you wonder if like somebody at a 2:30 Taco Bell drive-through is going to be like, I'm going to call Tony. I have a question about, what I should do to buy a house. But
yeah.
I don't think that ever actually happens.
Oh,
But yeah.
I get calls weekends, evenings, all the time. I do, and I love it. I live this life. I've been, like I said, I've done it for so long. I just, I enjoy helping people. That's the
Mhm.
biggest thing that I get out of this, and as I'm sure as you as well. That's what drives
Yes.
me, is helping people and teaching them, because we should have been taught a lot of this in high school, in
Oh my
schools. We
gosh.
talked about this the other day. If they
Totally.
would, if they would teach the kids, a couple of real life nuggets just to help them, and this would get everybody so much farther ahead than what you
Mhm.
and I had to do, learn, and most probably everybody out there, learn it through hard knocks as we go.
Right. Or how many kids just say, when am I ever going to use calculus in my day-to-day life after high school unless you're going into a career path? This kind of stuff you're actually going to use. So fair
Yeah.
enough.
Right.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. Couldn't
So
agree more.
where's the finance side of the market right now? Well, we're going to cover market forecast, finance options, and tools to help you along the process. Can you go to the next
So
slide for me?
yeah, I sure can. Here you go.
All right. So here's a graph, just kind of showing where interest rates have been, where they came from just in the last 22 and 23. The last couple of years, not to depress you right now or anything or discourage you, we were down to, I think, 2.75 is where we were at. And that was, it was just free money, and it was like, oh my gosh. It was dumb not to buy at that point. It was a no brainer, and everybody was. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, interest rates have gone up, and they were actually hitting 8%. This graph only shows that it was at 7, but we were hitting 8% right there at the end. Well, this doesn't go all the way through 23. This is mostly 22 and starting of 23. But anyways, as this says here, going into 24, most economists agree that the interest rate should decline somewhat at the start of the year, but it actually declined the end of 23. It was declining before we even hit the end there. And since the beginning of the year, we're very short into 24, but it's kind of leveled off. And that's kind of what we expect. That's normally what things do, but there's different things that affect the interest rates. A lot of people think whenever the feds come out, and there's a lot of news shows that say, oh, the feds are lowering interest rates. It's time to buy, houses. Well, the feds lowering interest rates has nothing to do with mortgage rates. And I get so tired of seeing people on the news link the two together. They do not. The Fed rate does not influence the mortgage rates whatsoever. Fed rate is connected to let me back up. The only interest rate related to mortgages that the Fed rate influences are adjustable rate mortgages, ARMs. That's the only thing that's tied to the Fed rate. And we don't do a lot of those. And that's not really a good thing to get into. And we can get into that in another podcast.
Yeah.
The majority of what I do is fixed rate mortgages. you get a little bit in a danger zone when you get into adjustable rates, but that has to do with, again, what your future plans are, how long you plan on being in the home. If it's a short period of time that you plan on being there, maybe the arm's a good product. But again, like I said, we can go into that at another podcast.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry to break in,
Okay.
but it's always interesting too, because how many times have you seen that the Fed did their basis point increases and the consumer rate actually didn't change because they had some of that already baked into the cake, so to speak. So just because that rate goes up or goes down doesn't necessarily mean that your mortgage interest rate is actually going to change alongside of those increases or changes at the Fed level, way up at the top.
Right. Um, what the mortgage rate, it's not tied to, but what it follows very closely, if you want to try to follow interest rates to kind of see where they're going, is the 10-year bond market. That is what influences mortgage rates. And it doesn't directly. What that does is, by watching the bond rate, it helps you see where the investors are the ones that actually influence the mortgage rate directly. And so if you see investors investing in the bond rate and more buying more bond rates, if you see the bond rates going up, mortgage rates are going to come down a little bit. If you see bond
Mhm.
rates going down, more interest rates are going to be going up a little bit. And the reason why is because as investors go into the safe bond market, the mortgage companies want to influence the investors that are buying bond rates in the safer investment. They want to interest them back into the interest uh, mortgage rates so that they'll buy more mortgage rates uh, packages. Then they'll raise those rates to get them back over, so there's a better return on their investment. And anyways,
Mhm.
we can go into that again in more detail on another podcast. But
Sure.
so if you want to watch, it's the bond rates. So if the bond rates are coming down, you're going to see interest rates come down slowly. If you see bond rates go up, you're going to see interest rates follow them up, and so on and so forth. The other two things that influence the interest rate are global catastrophes or wars, these kinds
Mm,
of things. These, when there's unsettled, when the world is unsettled with large things that affect consumers, you're going to see it affect mortgage rates and the stock market. If the stock market is bad or if the stock market is doing really good, that is going to have an effect on mortgage rates as well. Um, Next slide.
okay. Moving right along.
Finance options. So you can get a mortgage through a bank, credit unions, mortgage companies, or independent brokers, and that independent broker is what I am. There's advantages and disadvantages to each and all of us. Um, let's start with banks. Um, Banks you trust, you're comfortable with, you might have your account with them, you want to keep all your stuff in one tidy little bow, and that makes you comfortable, that gives you confidence. There's nothing wrong, that's great. If that's what gives you peace of mind and calm, then by all means work with your bank. Um, the the con to that is banks tend to have a little bit higher interest rate because they have more brick and mortar. They've got more costs, more expenses, more staff. So they have to make a little bit more to cover all their expenses. So their interest rates are generally going to be a little bit on the higher side. Um, as far as their underwriting, for you to qualify, when you're working with your lender, we have to gather information: income, assets, how long you've been on your job, what kind of money you make, where your money comes from. You might have a couple of sources from where your money comes from. You might have changed jobs. There are different things that happen and that we look at to qualify you for your financing. Banks are the most conservative when it comes to that. So it might be a little bit more difficult to get approved with a bank if there's any little caveats, any challenges with any of those things. If you're just straight across the board, the perfect loan, good credit, good income, stable everything, you'll get qualified through a bank, no problem. That's great. If that's what makes you comfortable, go for it. The same thing with credit unions and mortgage companies. Credit unions are the same as banks, obviously, but credit unions have different rules. And so credit unions can be a little bit less conservative for the underwriting. Credit unions can have a little bit better interest rate than the banks do. Same with the mortgage company. They are going to be a little bit more competitive than the bank. They'll probably be right around where the credit union is. But it depends if you have a relationship with your credit union or a mortgage company currently and you trust them. That's the biggest thing, is trust when it comes to your finances and making a purchase of this amount. I mean, this is the biggest purchase probably of anything that you purchase in our lifetime. And I know it's been my largest purchase of anything that I've ever purchased. Lastly, independent broker. Again, that's what I do. I worked for banks and mortgage companies the majority of my career. And I decided to open my own brokerage and do my own thing because I didn't need all the support and everything that banks and credit unions offer, because I've been in the business long enough, and I don't need the kind of hand holding that they would provide a lender. And in the independent broker world, I work with over 200 lenders. I have more loan programs than a bank or credit union or mortgage companies can offer. Things that are way outside the box. If you have situations that a bank or credit union won't work with, for instance, if you want to buy a manufactured home that's been moved more than once, banks and credit unions will only touch a loan if the manufactured home was purchased and moved onto the property, and that's where it sits. Sometimes people will sell the manufactured home and they'll move it to another property. Well, I actually work with a few lenders that will finance a manufactured home that's been moved twice. So the other thing is as an independent broker, I don't have the overhead that banks and credit unions have. So my interest rates are going to be significantly better, usually 1/4 to 0.5% better than a bank or a credit union. On a $400,000 mortgage, a 0.5% is about $230 less. So that can make a significant difference when you're qualifying for a house. We can go into that again at a different in a different podcast. Did you have anything that you wanted to add, or if you don't, then we can move to the next screen?
You did. You brought up something really interesting, I think. And this is something I've dealt with a lot as first-time home buyers who are just dipping a toe in the water, starting to figure out what it is they want to do when they get started and what options are out there for them that is affordable. And oftentimes when I connect with them, they're coming to me asking about manufactured homes in Park. And that has been a really interesting conversation because they see the price point, between $150,000 to $250,000, and maybe you could talk to that point, because I think one of the things that I find in talking with these folks is by the time they do a loan for a home that's a manufactured home in a park, and they pay their space rent. Because for those who don't know, when you own the home in a manufactured home park, you don't own the dirt under the house. You only literally own the structure itself. So for that, you have to pay rent for the dirt under your house. So it's a totally different loan product. And what I found with these folks when we would go into these situations is, gosh, our mortgage payment, by the time we consider everything, that space rent, the mortgage on the house, and the terms that are different than a conventional or FHA or other type of regular, quote air quotes, mortgage loan, is the same as that what they would pay for a house that was a little bit higher price point. So maybe you have a couple quick points about that you could add.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Absolutely. So, manufactured home on leased land is basically what that is. And banks won't do it, credit unions don't do them, most mortgage companies don't do it. But guess what? I can do a manufactured home on leased land. So I'm glad you brought that up. But yes, in the interest rate, because it's a higher risk loan, the interest rate is going to be higher. Where today's rates, let me see, on Friday, interest rates right now, for conventional, we're in the mid 6% range. FHA, we're in the high 5, low 6s, and VA the same, high 5, low 6 range. Depending on, and that all depends on your credit score and down payment and all that kind of stuff. But the reason I brought that up, comparatively to a manufactured home on leased land, you're going to be looking at anywhere from 8 to 11% interest.
Wow.
And again, the lower your credit score, and I want to do a podcast with you on how important it is for the credit, and
Mm-hmm.
ways to tips on how to build your credit and all that kind of stuff. Because that's one of the things that I work with clients. If I've had people call and not think they were going to be able to get qualified, and we look at their credit, and I give them some pointers on how to build it. They build it in a couple of months, and then they come back, and now we can get them financed. But anyways, not to go off in left field there. So the interest rate is considerably higher. If you've got a low credit score, you're going to be in the higher, closer to the 10, 11%. There are two things that drive the interest rate on the manufactured homes on leased land. It's the credit score and the amount of the down payment. I can go down as low as 5% on a manufactured home on leased land. The lower the down, the higher the rate. So if you got a 620 is the lowest I can go on a credit score with a manufactured home with this scenario, 620 and 5% down, your interest rate's going to be 11 and a quarter, somewhere around there. If you have
Wow.
20% down and your credit score is 720, you're going to be looking at an 8% interest rate. So that'll
Wow.
make it more affordable. The other thing is the max duration, the max term I can go is 25 years. So that shortens it up by 5 years. So that also makes the payment a little bit higher than a regular 30-year mortgage.
And too, here in our area, and thinking of an 11% interest rate, maybe first time buyers just don't have a lot of credit yet, or they've been working to build it, or maybe they've had some dings or mistakes they've made and they're trying to work through some of that. Thinking of those higher interest rates plus space rent in our area right now, consistently I'm seeing $900 a month is a pretty good average. And you think about how much that $900 can buy you in purchase price on a house, on what's on real property, because manufactured homes, for those watching, are not considered to be real property in the state of Oregon. It's seen more like a motorhome or a vehicle as personal properties. So it's and then you're at $900 a month. So think of that too. And it could be the good and the right option for some people. So not saying that at all, that it's a terrible option for everybody, but it's fair to look at these things and consider all the moving parts when you're making these decisions, and know, and we could go into manufactured home. We could do the whole hours on that alone, um, to talk about if it's a good investment, or if you're looking to build for future purchase, or if it's more of a place to live type situation.
Right. And if you think about it, people look at, oh, well, the manufactured home is only $100,000 purchase price. Well, 5% of that is 5,000. And let's say you qualify for 10% interest rate. 10% interest rate on a 25-year term is going to make your principal and interest $863 to pay for that manufactured home. Now we have to add the lot rent. Let's say the lot rent is $700. That's going to make your mortgage payment basically almost $1,600 a month, just
And
for
that's
that.
not property taxes or homeowners insurance tacked into that
Right.
either.
Right.
So those are two things also as a homeowner. When you think of your monthly payment, a lot of people have that put into their escrow impound every month with their payment, and the mortgage company pays those two things when they come due. So you're also factoring those two things into it. And also space rent varies depending on where you're at. If I think about here in Canby and Donald and some of the areas where there's lots of these manufactured home communities, $900 a month is about where it's at, and I've even seen some that are $1,000 a month.
Wow.
So you're owning, but you're renting at the same time. So it's not. It's so definitely consider that if you're a first time buyer and you're seeing these types of properties and you're curious. Definitely worth a conversation about all the moving parts, and if it's going to be a step towards the goals that you're eventually looking to achieve with this
Right.
purchase. Yeah.
And
Thanks
it does,
thanks for that.
you bet. And it does fit, it's got to fit the right person. It might be the right fit for you. We just have to be able to go through all your, that's what a good lender does. And I consider myself a good lender, is I go through as many options as I can to help you understand what's going to fit your budget, your current situation, your future plans. We talk about everything to try to make sure that we're putting you in something, not just to get you into the home and then I say goodbye and good luck. I want to make sure that you're in a good position and it fits your goals and your needs.
Perfect.
Next, I think I got one more. Yeah, that one right there. Tools. So in this market that we're at, interest rates are still a little on the higher side than where we're hoping they will go. And so I've got three things here that are pretty significant tools as far as being able to afford the payment. We can do a temporary buy down. We can do a permanent buy down in interest rate. That is what that is. Or that term, date the rate, marry the house. And we can go into that a little bit more. And I'll cover these. I know we've gone past our hour. I'm not sure. Do we have more
It's
time?
all good. I like to think anyone watching, we have a captive audience. It's a snow day. So, I mean, let's just relax. They can,
Okay.
just keep going. It's all good. Let's make sure we cover everything. So,
Okay.
all
All
good.
right.
Yeah, keep
Well,
going.
I'll go into the first one, temporary buy down. What is a temporary buy down? Well, that's where the interest on your payment is paid up front, either the first 2 years or the first 3 years. And so that reduces your, or part of your interest. That reduces your payment for the first 3 years, 2 years, 1 year. You can go up to 3 years, 2 to 3 years. So it's called a 2-1. If you hear the term 2-1 buy down or 3-1 buy down from your lender, or you see that on the internet or something, what that means is your interest rate that you qualify for. Let's say you qualify for 7% interest rate. You can do the 3-2-1 buy down. And so your interest rate is going to be 3% lower the first year. The second year, it'll be 2% lower. The third year will be 1% lower. And then the fourth year, it will be at that 7% from there on.
And
Um,
and this is, out of curiosity or just to clarify for those watching, that 3-2-1 buy down, you have to qualify to make that payment when there is no reduction. So once
Correct.
those 3-2-1 years are gone, you're up to that full payment, and when you bought the home, you have to qualify for that amount. Um,
Correct.
so be prepared, if you're considering that, as well.
Yes, that's a very good point. That you do have to qualify for that 7% to start with to make sure that you're going to qualify when you get there. But the good thing, so there's a few things. So if you're listening, and I would say take some notes on this, because there's a few little caveats that you want to remember about the temporary buy down. So the temporary buy down, you have to pay for up front. So if that temporary buy down, say, costs $7,000, it comes out of your pocket unless the seller, which is the majority of the time, the seller is the scenario that this works best with. If the seller pays that buy down for you, there are some situations where I've had clients that it because of their situation, it was kind of like a savings. It helped them. They had the money, they just didn't want that full payment for the first couple of years,
Mhm.
because what they were planning on doing is before that first few years, they were hoping interest rates will be down to 5% or lower in a year or two after they did this, and they would just refinance at that time. And guess what? They get that whatever's left over of that money in that buy down, they get that back. So it's kind of like a
Mhm.
savings. So actually, if your seller pays for that buy down, guess what? If you refinance, if you buy a house and the seller, a lot of builders are doing this, like you said. Um, and if you refinance, because interest rates come down, let's say the end of this year, interest rates come down and we're at 5.5%. And you're like, yeah, that's golden. I want that rate. You refinance, whatever's left over in that buy down, you get a refund of. So even though it didn't come out of your pocket, it goes back to
Mhm.
you. It doesn't go back to the
Yeah.
seller.
Yeah. One thing I tell folks using this temporary rate who are considering it is, your payment, what it would be at the full 7% and what you need to anticipate it being when this whole process is over. So I always suggest to them is continue making that full payment, whether you pay against your property onto with principal and interest, pay against that on your mortgage, or set the money aside in savings, so that it's basically like you're making that payment every month. You're used to making that payment. And in the meantime, you've either chunked away at the principal additionally during that time, or you've where you can, or you've set aside the money in savings so you have a chunk over those first few years. So, um, that's usually what I tell people to do, just to prepare if they're going to consider using that type of a temporary buy down.
Sorry, I was um, had an important text that came across. I had to answer.
Mhm.
Anyway, sorry about that. So yes, that's absolutely true. So the permanent buy down, what that is you buy the interest rate down when you're originating your loan, and that is what it is through the whole 30-year term or whatever term that you are getting into. For instance, on Friday, so the par interest rate for a conventional loan with 20% down, you don't buy the rate down. That's what par means. Par means there's no credit or it doesn't cost you anything. My par interest rate was 6.875.
Mm.
Um, most banks are in the low sevens. I'm at 6.875. But if you wanted to buy that rate down, a 1% buy down, so 1% of the loan amount. So if your loan amount is 400,000, it would cost you $4,000 to buy the rate down. You could buy it down to 6.375.
Mm.
So what we would do is what I do with my clients is I work with them and I break down, okay, this cost is going to get you down to this rate. This rate is going to be this much less per month. Then you divide that number into the cost of buying the rate down to determine how long it will take to break even on investing in the buy down. And if you think you're going to be in the home longer or not refinance sooner than that break even point, then it would be something to consider buying that rate down. You can buy it down 2 points. There's usually a limit. 3 points is usually about the max, but it just kind of depends, again, on how long you're going to be in the home, how much it costs, as to whether or not it's going to be a smart investment or not. And that is a good question with your lender if you're working with someone right now to go over that, or give me a call and we can work on that as well.
Hey, I have a question for you, Tony. So of these two, the temporary buy down, whether it's a 2-1 or 3-2-1 versus the permanent buy down, if we look at those two and compare them side by side, what are the pros and cons of each of those in these situations? Or is one more conservative than the other? And what should somebody be aware of when they consider these types of buy down opportunities?
That's a good question. I haven't really focused on exactly what you just asked, but I'll do my best to kind of address that. For a temporary buy down, pros and cons, it's not a bad thing if it fits your specific situation. It doesn't really give you an advantage unless the seller pays for that. Then that's something that would be to your advantage. It would be an asset. But if you're paying for it, it's coming out of your pocket, so you're not saving anything. It's just putting you in a better payment for a short period of time. The only way it would save you anything is if rates came down in, say, a year after that. Let's say you do a 3-year buy down and rates came down, let's say a year after you initiated it, and you're able to refinance, then you would save, because you're going to get that interest that you paid up front. You're going to get that back, and you're not going to pay that higher 7% interest rate for that during that period of time. Does that make sense? So there is, but everything's got to work out perfect for it to be a savings if you pay for it yourself. If the seller pays for it, then yeah, it is to your advantage. It's great. It's a more conservative way to save money the initial 3 years, but then you're looking at the 7% interest rate once you're there. A buy down is, I would say, is if interest rates are on their way up like they were a year ago, when they're on their way up, a buy down's not really the best thing to do unless you only plan on being in the house for 3 years. If you know you're going to sell it, if you plan on being in the house longer than that, it's not really a really good tool. It's a better tool when the market's interest rate market is on its way down, because then you can have that opportunity to possibly refinance, along the way down, if that goes along. The permanent buy down, that what you're getting, and you're, like I said, you do the math as far as how long you need to be in the home for it to be of a benefit. So let's say you buy it down, and the math comes out to you're going to break even in 3 years. So you spend that money up front, and then after that 3 years, then we do the math as to what you're going to save after that. That's an easier way. That's a much simpler way to see what the savings are, and as to whether or not it is the good investment or not. So they're both good. They, anyways, I hope that answered your question. You're muted.
Thank you. Not muted anymore. Um, I think for folks who are considering these types of products, I've heard some agents in groups and things I follow talk about the temporary buy down as being a quote glorified adjustable rate mortgage. Um, but it's not quite that, I don't think. Um,
No.
but it's interesting because I think it's really up to the lender, assuming somebody's working with somebody who's experienced and qualified to advise them. Um, but I think at each individual situation, they're going to find what's going to make the most sense for them over the course of time. And also, like you said, based on their goals. If they're going to be in this house for the long term and this is their 10-year house, then you're going to approach this differently than if this is, we are going to be in this house for 3 years. This is our stepping stone to the next house we want to buy, or whatever the case is. Um,
Exactly.
and going from there and finding the solution that's going to work best. It's all customizable and creative, and that's the beautiful thing about it is there never seems to be a one size fits all solution when I work with clients, and I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, that's why I love it. It's always something just a little. It's a puzzle. I love puzzles,
Yes.
and I love helping people. So,
Yeah.
um,
It's
and
Tetris.
is
We
it?
play Tetris in some
Oh
ways,
yeah,
piecing all the
right.
things together. And sometimes they come too fast and the computer cheats, and we just have to figure it out.
And again, that's why you want to work. That's why trust is such a huge word in our industry, both with the realtor and the lender. You know, the higher the trust, the better you're going to get taken care of. If you don't know your realtor at all, or you don't trust them, or they weren't referred to you, your lender, by someone that you do trust, you know, you don't know what you're going to get in the box of chocolates, right?
Right.
But anyways, so the
And
last one
yeah.
is. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, nothing. I was just, yeah, you never know. It's Forrest Gump. You never know what you're gonna get, right?
Right.
Sometimes.
So the last one, as far as date the rate, marry the house, like I was saying earlier, we touched on it. It's you know, if you can afford the interest rate right now, where they're at, because we are trending on a downward, which is a good lower rate trajectory. Um, People that are waiting for interest rates to get better before they buy, but they can afford it now, but they just don't want that payment, there's a good chance you might miss the boat because of what we discussed earlier is right now the inventory, there's not a lot of inventory. It's starting to come back a little bit, but as interest rates go down, the inventory is going to come up, but also the buyers are going to come out of the woodworks. I promise you, I've seen it. I've been in the business long enough. I've seen it happen more than
Mhm.
once. And then what's going to happen is there's the beautiful house that you could have bought right now that was listed for 600,000. And if you wait 3 months, let's say rates come down, spring's out, everybody's out on the market, and that house is still on the market, just happens to be back on the market or whatever, interest rates are down, but now that there's 20 people that are bidding on that house, and two of them are paying 50,000 higher than the list price. And you could have had it today with a higher interest rate slightly and refinanced it when rates come down a little bit.
Mhm.
That's what that little saying is about. That's what we
Right.
talk about.
Right. And I think that's like we talked about earlier, we don't depend on the interest rates coming down. We plan that it could happen. We prepare for it, but it's never guaranteed. Just like anything in life and in the market, nothing's ever guaranteed. We can r- accurately rely on it happening, but not guarantee it.
Yeah. And
Um,
I'm
yeah.
glad you made a point of re-saying that, and we can't say that enough. We're not trying
Right.
to. I'm not trying to sell anybody to buy now. Hurry up, get out there and buy now.
Hmm.
I'm just saying I've been in the situation myself. I've seen it happen more than once, where people have waited. because they just wanted to see the rates come down. Well, it just changes the dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time you're going to pay a little bit more. Now,
Yeah.
One way or another.
Right. This is the time, like we mentioned earlier, that you only get your sale price on your house one time. And for those who are naysayers, the market, and to the best of the information and knowledge that we have, is not going to be crashing anytime soon. So you are not looking ahead at this point to seeing anything like we saw in 2008, 2009, and in the future coming up. So remember, you only get your sale price on your house one time. And if and economics, supply and demand, anytime there's low amounts of things that people want to buy, and there's a lot more people that want to buy the thing than there are things to buy, that the prices are always going to go up. So we're still in that low inventory situation. So stuff to consider. Absolutely.
There was one more thing I wanted to say. Oh, I got it back. It was floating away and it came back. And that is what I really, truly, personally think we're in a sweet spot. We're in a sweet spot right now. Rates aren't
Mm-hmm.
ridiculously bad. They're not 13%. They're not 12%. We're in the high sixes, high to low sixes. And the only way to know that you're in a sweet spot is when time goes by and you're able to say, oh, shoot, that was the sweet spot. I should have bought.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
The only way you
And
know
I
you're in a
think,
sweet spot is hindsight.
yeah, yeah.
And
Well, and just like anything, there's pros and cons to any time that you're buying. There are definite cons to buying today, and that is that interest rates are higher. If we consider 2020, 2021, and what was happening with those interest rates then, yeah, the interest rates are a challenge, a con of buying in today's market. But if we look back a couple years ago, the con of a couple years ago when rates were lower, there was so much competition. And oftentimes people were bidding against 10 other people or more. I've heard horror stories from people who were like, we were one of 50 offers on a property, or they're writing $100,000 over ask, paying appraisal gaps in additional cash. And so that was a major con of buying, during those years as well. So you buy in the market you're in, I think, is a great way to look at it. And there's always a downside and there's always upside to everything. If you make that list, you take your paper and you do the pros and cons. Um, there's always positives and negatives to any time that you buy. It's just, do the positives outweigh the negatives for you individually in your situation, and what's going to make the most sense for you.
yep. Hey, Jen, while we're talking, you want to put your information back up there so they make sure
Yeah,
that
you bet. You bet. So if you're new to this, we've been going at this a while because it's a snow day. What else are we going to do, right? So I'm Jennifer Schurter. I am with Real Broker. This QR code on here will take you to my link tree where you can connect with me. So being a realtor, I love to help people answer questions. And if you have questions about your particular property, the market where you live, happy to help answer any of those questions and get you on a path to the goal, whatever that is, whatever that looks like. You bet. Any final closing thoughts from you, Tony, about all of this?
My final closing thought is this is the first one of these I've ever done, and I had a lot of fun. I want to
Good.
do this again, and I think that we have so many different directions we can go in more detail on specific things. So if anybody, if there's anybody still out there listening or watching, if you have any topics that you want to hear more about, by all means, please throw them in the chat and we can address those, or we will come up with our own on our next, is this a podcast? What is this?
Well, it's live streaming. It's on YouTube. It's on Facebook. Unfortunately, our Instagram feed did not work for some reason today, so I have to look into that. But yeah, this will be posted. It'll be available on YouTube. If you go to my YouTube page, which is Living in Portland Suburbs, and my name, Jennifer Schurter, you'll find my channel. It'll be housed there under the live tab. So you'll be able to come back to this and watch whatever pieces that you missed, including the market update for Clackamas County that I covered in the beginning. But yeah, there's the content is endless. The topics, the questions are endless. I mean, there's several notes I took, like you mentioned, preparing your credit score. How do you do that? What are some things you can do to be credit ready to buy a house? And investment properties, a whole other ball of wax. Manufactured home purchases, the pros and cons for that for people who are looking for affordable ways to get their first place. So, and on and on. The
And we
topics
can,
are endless.
yeah, we can go more into detail with the advantages and disadvantages of a seller's market and a buyer's market.
You bet. We barely scratched the surface, but if we wanted to go in depth, it would be you would be binge watching a series on Netflix
Right,
for 12
right.
hours
I'm gonna have to
instead
get
of
with the
this.
program. I'm gonna have to get with the program and get my own YouTube thing going and all that. So
Well, I
this
look
was
forward
a
to
lot
it.
of fun. It was a lot of
Yes,
fun.
thanks for coming on here, and thanks for watching. Thanks for being here on this snowy slash icy. I don't know that it's really snowing here. It looks like we're getting ice pellets still. So stay safe, stay warm. Enjoy the time inside the warm confines of your four walls, and we will be here to help in keeping it real for you. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you soon.